Good morning and welcome to our October Shotsuki service. It's been a while since I've had the opportunity to speak with you, but it's nice to be able to share the Dharma with you again today. And I hope that all of you are doing well, and I want to thank you for your continued support of the temple. Now, as I think we know, these Shotsuki services are Buddhist memorial services, and as we acknowledge the names of our loved ones who've passed on, we also encounter the Buddhist teaching of impermanence. Maybe some people find these memorial services kind of dark or even depressing. Actually, I think I mentioned recently that in one of my study classes, we had been discussing Shakyamuni Buddha's own encounters with impermanence, with aging, illness, and death. But that at one point, a participant had complained, "Gee, Reverend Peter, can't I just be happy?" I'm pretty sure I responded yes, but in our Buddhist tradition, we're taught that it's really only through our encounters with the truth of impermanence that a more lasting happiness and a deeper appreciation of our loved ones can arise within us. And I think this is why our Shotsuki services are important. We've encountered this truth through our experience of the coronavirus pandemic itself, of course. It's been 2.5 years since the temple closed its doors, and we're only now beginning to understand the real toll that these 2.5 years have taken on all of us. Not just on ourselves and our families, but on our institutions, which includes our Buddhist temples. Of course, I do think we can look forward to reopening the temple. Okay, now I'm going to be a little careful here because I think twice before, once in 2020 and once in 2021, the temple did briefly reopen, only to close again due to another surge, right? But I did hear that the temple hopes to reopen. Well, I was going to give a date, but I think I'll just say the temple hopes to reopen soon. By the way, speaking of the temple's reopening, I would like to quickly share another update. Some of you might remember that almost exactly 2.5 years ago, besides the temple's closing, my Star Wars seminar was also canceled. Yes, I'm still hoping to present it, and it will be updated to cover not just Star Wars films, but the elements from the Star Wars TV shows, such as The Mandalorian. Also, it will be targeted less to Star Wars nerds like myself, and more to a general audience of Star Wars fans and their families. And actually, I was thinking of offering games, prizes, and maybe, if I can get a few people to help me, even some Star Wars-y food. No, not Ray's Instabread. Not Luke's Thalasiren blue milk. And not Chewie's roasted pork. But something that, shall we say, you don't have to be a Jedi or Wookiee to enjoy. But before setting a date, I think we probably have to wait a little while longer for the temple to become fully open and up to speed. But meanwhile, if you want to start researching recipes for, Star Wars-y food, please go ahead. Okay, for my talk today, I'd like to share with you one more update. As I think many of you know, my wife Diane and I became grandparents about 3 years ago. And, one of the perks of being a grandparent, besides, of course, the wonderful joy of having a grandchild, is that unlike when you were a parent, you don't necessarily have to deal with any of those messy toddler details, if you know what I mean. You can spend a few hours with them. You can, enjoy your time with them. And then when you start to feel exhausted, as you inevitably will, you can just announce, okay, well, it was great to see you guys again. Then gracefully leave and retreat home for a well-deserved nap. But these so-called perks all evaporated this past summer. My wife and I were again asked to babysit our grandchild, but due to a job change, my son and daughter-in-law no longer lived 3 miles away, but about 1,200 miles away in Austin, Texas. And this wasn't just babysitting while they went out to a movie. This was for close to a week while they attended a friend's destination wedding in Spain. So yes, this wasn't just babysitting, but house sitting 24/7 with our grandson. Now, don't get me wrong, it's always a joy to spend time with our grandchild, but a whole week where we have to basically act like his parents. Okay, spoiler alert. This is where my talk gets a little dark. Oh, okay. So first, we had to deal with the hassles of flying to a distant city, like the airport or airports, renting a car, and figuring out directions and so forth. But in the past, all of that was always done for an actual vacation. Because you see, it turns out that while we did have some free time during the day while our grandson was at daycare, this being the middle of summer in Texas, it was pretty much near 100 degrees every day. And so it was just too hot to go out. Not only that, but I was informed that an additional assignment of mine would be to walk their dog twice a day, early in the morning, and then later at dusk. And, yes, those of you who are dog owners know, I was also reminded to be sure to clean up after the dog did their business. Never having owned a dog myself, I think this assignment had me more apprehensive than dealing with our grandson. But actually, the most hair-raising or hair-thinning episode was that on our last evening there, we accidentally got locked out of the house. Yes. So I remember picking up our grandson from daycare, putting him in the car seat, arriving at the house, and then, nightmares of nightmares, not finding the house key on the rental car ring where it had been. It was like, 5 or 6 p.m. and still 95 degrees. And then when I texted my son, who by that time was on his way home from Spain, and asked him if he happened to carry a spare key on him, he said there was a spare key, but it was inside the house on the refrigerator. So starting to kind of, panic, I put our, now understandably upset grandchild back in the car seat, drove back to the daycare and to the Target store that we had been to, and searched for the house key in their parking lots. No luck. But then, seemingly out of any good options, Diane, maybe perhaps sensing my panic, calmly suggested trying to call a locksmith. Now, I don't believe in miracles, but somehow the very first locksmith I called that I'd seen on Yelp, thank goodness for Yelp, turned out to be a true saint, or shall we say bodhisattva. We did have to wait another hour for him to arrive, but fortunately he was able to open a rear door. We all got inside and found that spare key on the refrigerator. But the really hilarious thing, if you like dark humor, that is, was that later that night, Diane found the original house key wedged in the car seat. So apparently, while wrestling with getting her grandchild into the seat, and those of you who have toddlers know what I'm talking about, the key probably got caught. The key was in my hand and probably got caught on the seatbelt or something and just fell off. Well, I think this experience is one that I'm going to remember for a long, long time. Hopefully, when our grandson is a bit older, we'll be able to tell him the story and share a few laughs with him over it, or maybe not. Well, that's my how I spent my summer vacation story. But I think even though it's describing a different kind of difficulty than reflecting on the loss of our loved ones at this Shotsuki service, I do think the result of these encounters with impermanence is really the same. We are sensitized to the unpredictability of life, and that we should not take our loved ones for granted. And with it now being a couple of months or so since all this happened, whenever we FaceTime or Zoom with our grandson, I can't help but remember the close call that we went through with him. And I don't exactly know how to explain it, but there is something that now sort of swells up inside me, just a little bit. And I think this is why we say that these Shotsuki services are an opportunity to encounter the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha. At the core of the Dharma is the teaching of impermanence. Life is unpredictable, constantly flowing and changing. Nothing stays the same. Nothing is static. And whether we're aware of it or not, all our lives are deeply interconnected in this constant flow. Of course, much to our chagrin, Buddhism does not sugarcoat reality by telling us that everything will always go the way we want. As we know, impermanence is the ultimate reality that we have to seriously reflect on. But I think the Buddha's teaching also has a positive aspect, shall we say. And this positive aspect is that because of the impermanence and unpredictability of life, we can appreciate our loved ones even more deeply. Because of our difficulties and loss, we understand the preciousness of the time we spend with our loved ones. In other words, in spite of all the difficulties, or actually because of the difficulties, the time we are able to spend with our loved ones is indeed very precious. And so, as the Buddha taught, it's because of the truth of impermanence that we can open up to the joy of life and appreciate the preciousness of our lives today, and indeed the lives of our loved ones and our own lives. Our lives and the lives of our loved ones are such wonderful gifts because they are impermanent. Well, that's my message for today. Thank you very much for listening, and Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.